Thank you all so much for coming this morning. Happy New Year, and I might add Gong Hei Fat Choi, or if you prefer, Gong Si Fat Sai, the Year of the Rat, which is a symbol of intelligence, agility, and quick thinking, so quite apropos for today. Welcome to the 2019 Faculty Retreat. My name is Ming Dariotis. 2020, God, already, and in the most public way, thank you. My name is Ming Dariotis. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a professor of Asian American Studies and an affiliate faculty of the Educational Leadership Doctoral Program. I'm also the faculty director of CEDL, our Center for Equity and Excellence in Teaching and Learning. We welcome you first with an acknowledgement that this is the land of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who live in and actively cultivate and manage the coastal areas in what are now known as San Francisco and San Mateo counties. Land acknowledgements are a tradition of Native peoples and function as recognition of those to whose home we have entered. Most of today's Ohlone peoples are not federally recognized, making it even more important that we, as members of an institution on Ohlone land, do everything we can to acknowledge and celebrate not only their 10 to 15,000 years of history in this place, but also their continued presence here. The San Francisco State American Indian community has contributed many things to our campus and to the larger Bay Area. The We Are Still Here mural on the Cesar Chavez Student Center reveals much of this history, which includes the 1969 to 1971 occupation of Alcatraz by American Indian students, many of them from San Francisco State, including Richard Oakes, Mohawk, who is well remembered on this campus. One of their primary requests was the creation of a cultural and educational center for Indigenous and American Indian people. And although that vision was never realized on Alcatraz, we hope to carry it forward here. Former lecturer in American Indian Studies, Kim Shuck, Cherokee, is now the Poet Laureate of San Francisco. San Francisco State's American Indian Student Club, SKINS, hosts an amazing annual powwow. And our American Indian Studies Department runs San Francisco State's Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Program, or NAGPRA. Please take this acknowledgement as an encouragement to learn and teach more about American Indian people and Ohlone people particularly, for we cannot achieve our specific SF State mission of social justice through education without an understanding of how and why we are here in this specific place, gathered together as the people we are. Further, in the spirit of thanking people for the resources they share with us, I would like to take this opportunity to appreciate the Academic Senate for breakfast, the Provost for lunch, the University Corporation and the University Foundation for our afternoon reception, which will immediately follow President Mahoney's remarks. And I certainly hope you will stay for the party, which does feature fine wine, beer, and non-alcoholic libations. We also want to thank University Catering for donating the linens for today. All right, thanks. I am particularly pleased and excited that planning the retreat has been a collaborative effort between CEDL and the Academic Senate, a body with which I am deeply familiar. At this time, I would like to acknowledge the work of the retreat planning team. Teddy Albanak, Senate Vice Chair, Amy Kilgard, our beloved founding faculty director of CEDL, Maggie Beers, Assistant Vice President for Teaching and Learning, Tegan Summers, Director of Teaching and Learning Programs and Services, and our CEDL team, Leilani Serafin, Communication and Operations Lead, Instructional Designers and CEDL Consultants, Heidi Fridrickson, Deb Perry, Angie Petty, and Konstantina Seni, Instructional Associate Meg Gorski, and Hannah Anderson, our videographer. You'll see most of, if not all of these people around here today, and they have worked so hard to make this event possible. We are also very grateful to Vernon Piccinotti, Event and Technical Services Manager of the Annex, and his staff for doing a beautiful job setting up our space today. For our food, we acknowledge and thank the farmers, cooks, and other workers who nourish us today with their labor so that we may do the social, emotional, and mental labor we have before us today. And with that, I would like to move to introduce our plenary speakers. I'm deeply pleased and honored to introduce to you my colleague, friend, and former office mate, Dr. Allyson Tintiangco-Cubales. Fondly known to her students as Ate Allyson, Dr. Tintiangco-Cubales is an award-winning full professor in the College of Ethnic Studies at San Francisco State. She was very recently given the Lifetime Achievement Award for embodying equity and diversity by the UC Davis Social Justice Awards Committee. For the past 19 years, Dr. Tintiangco-Cubales has been teaching in the Asian American Studies Department with a focus on Filipino, and Filipinx American Studies. She is also an affiliated faculty member in the Educational Leadership Doctoral Program. She has mentored, and this is no exaggeration, hundreds of critical master's and doctoral students who are now teaching and working in schools and colleges across the nation. She is also the co-founder and co-director of Community Responsive Education, CRE, a firm that supports the development of responsive, equitable, and justice-driven educators. She is currently providing direct support to schools, districts, and organizations in San Francisco, Daly City, Oakland, New York, and Boston. Her most recent endeavor with CRE is the development of a community responsive wellness index that will be used in schools across the nation. She is also the founder of Pinay Pinoy Educational Partnerships, or PEP, an ethnic studies teaching and research pipeline. She has worked with several school districts throughout the nation, including the San Francisco Unified School District, to co-develop ethnic studies, social justice, and Filipino language curriculum. She is the author of 4 books of curriculum and numerous articles focused on the applications of critical pedagogy, ethnic studies curriculum, women's studies, and mother scholarship. She explores deeply in a chapter she authored for Fight the Tower, which is my anthology on Asian American women in academia. Dr. Tintiangco-Cubales was born and raised in the Bay Area to parents who were immigrants from the Philippines. She currently resides in San Francisco with her husband, a teacher and administrator at Balboa High, and a daughter, a sophomore at Balboa, and also an award-winning dancer studying at the Westlake School for the Performing Arts, and who I recently saw perform as the Sugar Plum Fairy in the Nutcracker. It was awesome. Our other speaker today is Jeff Duncan-Andrade, who is an associate professor of Raza Studies and Latino and Latina Studies and Race and Resistance Studies at San Francisco State University. He is also a founder of the Community Responsive Education Group and Roses in Concrete Community School, a community responsive lab school in East Oakland. As a classroom teacher and school leader in East Oakland for the past 27 years, his pedagogy has been widely studied and acclaimed for producing uncommon levels of social and academic success for students. Dr. Duncan-Andrade lectures around the world and has authored numerous journal articles and book chapters on effective practices in schools. He has written 2 books, and he is currently completing his 3rd with Harvard Press. His research interests and publications span the areas of curriculum change, teacher development and retention, critical pedagogy, and cultural and ethnic studies. In 2015, Dr. Duncan-Andrade was tapped to be a commissioner on the National Commission on Teaching and America's Future, and in 2016 was part of the great educators invited to the White House on National Teacher Appreciation Day by President Obama. He is also the 2019 laureate for the prestigious Brock International Prize in Education. Dr. Duncan-Andrade has also been ranked as one of the nation's most influential scholars by Ed Week's Public Influence rankings, and his transformational work on the elements of effective teaching in schools is recognized throughout the US and internationally. He works closely with teachers, school site leaders, union leaders, and school district officials to help them develop classroom practices and school cultures that foster self-confidence, esteem, and academic success among all students. Our plenary speakers are here today to give us a foundation for today's retreat, which we have titled, "To Serve the People, Pedagogies for the City's University." This title calls back 50 years to the social movements in the Bay Area and on this campus that helped create the College of Ethnic Studies and that continue to guide many of us across campus in diverse areas. Our goals today are guided by CETL's mission to be the heart of the university's commitment to a culture that values and rewards teaching, supports diversity among learners, and promotes learning environments that foster social justice and the respectful and vigorous exchange of ideas in which students and faculty thrive and succeed. So I have been here since 1999. And I remember retreats in a variety of formats, always with the goal of building community among faculty and colleagues. The purpose of this year's faculty retreat is no different, but it is a different format. And one of the things that I wanted to emphasize is that we are welcoming not only faculty, but also staff, students, and administrators to join us in the endeavors that we share. We, the Planning Committee, realized that many on campus would be launching new initiatives to support student success this semester, and that the retreat could be a place where we invest ourselves with a shared sense of our collective purpose. We have projects ranging from teaching and learning communities to success in the majors, as well as self-identified affinity groups. The idea that we have is that you will stay with the same group of people at your post-plenary discussion and for your afternoon tabletop workshops. But we recognize that many of you, like I am a Gemini, would like to float around and meet everybody today. So if you do wish to switch to another table for the afternoon discussion, you may, but we would prefer that you try to stay with one group and get to know them really well and develop a foundation, especially if you're working on a project together this semester. For most of you, today's conversations, which start with an opportunity to discuss the plenary, which how many of us ever have that chance at any conference, and then go on to the afternoon tabletop discussions, are just the beginning of work that you will continue through this semester and possibly through the fall. And these are some really exciting projects that I hope that you will take the time to learn about today, even if you can't participate in every discussion. We're doing important work, and we are doing it in collaborative, equity-minded community. It is with this in mind that we selected our inspiring plenary speakers and have asked our provost to address us. Now, I have the honor to introduce our provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs, Jennifer Summit. A widely published scholar of medieval and early modern English literature, Dr. Summit has received major fellowships and awards from the National Endowment of the Humanities, the American Council of Learned Societies, and the Modern Language Association. Dr. Summit's scholarly interests bridge the medieval and early modern periods and focus on the histories of reading, literature, and knowledge, with a special interest in literacy and the disciplines. She has published numerous books on her subject areas, and she has also published widely on issues of curriculum design, student learning, and innovation in higher education. At San Francisco State, she has led the creation of the Division of Undergraduate Education and Academic Planning, which includes general education, writing in the disciplines, and writing across the curriculum. Student academic support and advising, curriculum development, student learning assessment, the Metro College Success Program, and the Institute for Civic and Community Engagement. Provost Summit also co-chaired the campus-wide Student Success and Graduation Initiative Task Force, which pulls together administrators, faculty, staff, and students to monitor and increase the university's graduation rates. She is a relentless advocate for student success, and we are honored to have her lead our efforts today. Please join me in a warm welcome for our Provost, Jennifer Summit.
Thank you so much, Ming. And I want to start by thanking the Center for Equity and Excellence in Teaching and Learning and everybody who organized today's splendid event. It's a really great vibe in here. I also want to call out the importance of CETL's name, particularly the middle two terms, equity and excellence, because these are two terms that historically haven't gone together. Because as we know in our country, educational excellence has not been distributed equitably. This is what the great bell hooks calls the tragedy of education that does not promote freedom. As many of you know, bell hooks taught here, as well as at places like Oberlin and Yale. The difference between the institutions, as she put it, is that elite institutions are expected to honor their students' voices with high-quality learning experiences. While at state institutions like ours, she says, students are continually expected to be deficient and unworthy. But we turn this around. From its founding in the crucible of shared governance, CETL has insisted that equity demands excellence, that high quality education isn't a privilege reserved for the lucky few, but a public good. It's inclusive, not exclusive. And that's our mission at San Francisco State. Over the last 4 years, we focused on student success and graduation at the core of our social justice mission. Meeting the diverse needs of our students is a cross-campus collaborative effort, but what it comes down to is high-quality learning for all of our students. In the words of our plan, student success means holding our students to high expectations and offering them the support they need to reach them. It means graduating our students with degrees that represent learning experiences of the highest possible quality and making sure that we exclude none of our students from this vision. It also means supporting and valuing the success of our faculty, whose passion and genius lie at the heart of student success. Our faculty are like none other at any institution. They are teacher scholars. They approach their classroom as a high-level inquiry. They interpret their disciplines through a lens focused through the experience of our students. And as they know, as Bell Hooks puts it, that education as the practice of freedom is not just about liberatory knowledge, it's about liberatory practice in the classroom. Today's retreat drives this point home, that equity-based teaching is a skill honed by practice and by commitment. It's also a collaborative effort that we learn and share in community, the better to grow into our highest potentials. The retreat also features, I'm glad to see, a number of tables focused on developing interdisciplinary clusters with the potential to foster new academic offerings. This is one of the earliest fruits of the Academic Master Plan, whose participants asked for opportunities to collaborate across the disciplines on big questions and pressing social needs that demand the benefit of broad perspectives. It also creates community around affinity groups that will support faculty of all kinds as teachers, scholars, and university citizens long after the retreat is done. So in addition to thanking CETL, I want to thank all of you for being here, for making this investment in yourselves and one another for the sake of our students and the social justice mission that drives us all. Have a wonderful day.
Hi, everybody. Wow, it feels different up here than sitting out there. It's like students. There's always empty at the beginning, in the front, right? My name is Allyson Tintiangco-Cubales. I want to start by thanking Ming Dariotis for always having my back, and then also bringing us to the stage. We have never done this before in front of faculty. And my colleague, Jeff Duncan-Andrade, and I have been working together since he started here at SF State, which is nearly...
Long time.
Long time. I think between the both of us, we've been here for, I think, 38 years or something like that. Okay. So we were brought here today, I think, to talk about ethnic studies. We're from the College of Ethnic Studies, and I just want to acknowledge it's our 50th anniversary. So we should give a round of applause to Ethnic Studies. I think for some people, when they think of San Francisco State, they think it's synonymous with ethnic studies. Those of us here know it's much more diverse than just ethnic studies, but people from the outside see SF State and they go automatically, we're down, right? When you, as faculty members, no matter where you go, they imagine that we are the University of Social Justice. And so for us, here at the university, it's our job to make sure we step up and live up to that reputation. I think in many cases, this idea of ethnic studies is something that those of us who are maybe not in ethnic studies don't see necessarily the direct benefits of having a college of ethnic studies on this campus versus a department or a program. The history of ethnic studies here at San Francisco State is vast. But most importantly, it begins with the land that we stand on. And Ming has already acknowledged that. And so we always, for us, when we start this work, we always start with a land acknowledgement, wherever we go. And Indigenous people all over the nation and beyond, it's important that we acknowledge that their voices are oftentimes silenced and not heard or forgotten, but they are still here. And so we always begin with that. Along with that, we also want to acknowledge our ancestors. Very important. One of the most profound ancestors and most recent ancestors here at San Francisco State was Dr. Don Buholano Mabalan. And for some of you who might know me, she's very much with me every day. She's my best friend. I don't know how it happened, but we ended up at the same university, like working together. And so I really deeply feel her loss, but also know that what she has left for us is a legacy that we must continue. So quickly, what we're going to cover, and I'm just gonna just say an hour between me and Jeff, woo, that's gonna be hard. But we're gonna really try, and we're gonna make sure that I stay on point so that he gets to his 30 minutes. So quickly, what we're gonna cover today is what is ethnic studies pedagogy? Why does ethnic studies pedagogy matter? Matter to people in ethnic studies and matter to people who are not in ethnic studies. And then how do we do ethnic studies pedagogy? And that will be mostly what Jeff talks about today. So I'll start doing number 1 and 2, and then I'll hand off to Jeff. Important. This slide has to be in all of our presentations when we teach ethnic studies. We owe it to the Black Student Union. We owe it to the Third World Liberation Front to be able to talk about ethnic studies at the higher level of this place called college or university, right? So basically they spoke out. They spoke out in 1968, but what I've heard is it happened way before 1968. But we acknowledge it as 1968. They spoke out against the lack of access. They also spoke out against misrepresentation and the overall neglect of Indigenous people and people of color, both in our curriculum and our programming, and then also the face of who the faculty and the staff are, right? That was what we were fighting for 50 years ago. Now, this led to the establishment of the College of Ethnic Studies. Actually, at the time, it was the School of Ethnic Studies, and then it transferred into the college, right? And then our demands were really about acknowledging the intellectual traditions of people who have been marginalized. And as our provost mentioned, not just marginalized, but also seen as having deficits. And so the goal of the College of Ethnic Studies was to highlight the fact that we cannot ignore the people. I mean, this whole summit is supposed to be about serve the people. To serve the people, you need to know the people. That's extremely important. And Jeff will go on later about how do we create relationships with these people. We need them to serve the people. And so just to highlight the major goals of ethnic studies, it was about access, it was clearly about retention, and it is still about retention because we want to make sure that students not only get into the university, but get retained and then graduate. And then the last piece that we're really going to focus on is this idea of community. That's the arc, quote unquote, the arc of ethnic studies. So why ethnic studies? So we know what ethnic studies is, sort of, right? Okay. At San Francisco State, now this statistic was given to me by the Associate Provost, Sujit Parapitaya. Sujit Parapitaya. He says, students in all majors, so we are all part of different majors, not just ethnic studies, students of all majors who took and passed ethnic studies classes graduate at a higher rate than their peers in their major who took and did not pass ethnic studies classes. There's a lot more statistics around that, but there is this note that says, basically, if someone takes ethnic studies, they're going to do better in school. Not only at San Francisco State. So there's more statistics that I can share with you. So there was a study by our colleagues at Stanford, and when they study something, it becomes word, even though we've been doing it for hella long. Okay, that's Allyson. So Stanford, right, they do this study. And they're like, wow, ethnic studies in 9th grade works. They prove it by saying it improved attendance by 21%. That's huge in San Francisco Unified. Actually, in any district, if you can improve attendance, you're like, wow, that program works. Grade point averages jumped 1.4. That's enormous. From middle school, from 8th grade to 9th grade. The grade point averages jumped 1.4. And then credits earned increased by 23 credits, which means they're more likely to graduate. So people are like, wow, ethnic studies works. And for those of us who've been at the university, we're like, wow, it's been working for 50 years, right? But what's interesting about this study is the question why. Why does ethnic studies work? So I'm going to go to that next slide and show you why. Every single one of these, plus thousands, graduated from San Francisco State. The reason why those statistics at Stanford skyrocketed, or why they have the data that they have, is because of the people who are teaching ethnic studies. They studied this dude's classroom. I'm probably not supposed to say that because it's anonymous, but he was our student. These were our students. So when we look at the data around ethnic studies, locally and across the nation, it's our students who have made that happen. So I want to be very mindful that sometimes when we look at data, we are looking at numbers, but actually, they represent people. And they represent all the good work that we all have been doing together. So why ethnic studies? A little bit more, because it's not just about academic achievement. It's also about some major things that then talk about the wellness of the people we work with, the youth that we work with, the students that we work with. So there has been studies now proven that reflective, relevant, and responsive teaching and learning get these results: high self-esteem, self-concept, and self-determination. That should not be a surprise because those are some of the goals of ethnic studies. Mental wellness. The woman here, also a former student of San Francisco State, now getting her PhD at University of Alaska, studying mental wellness of people who understand their ethnic identity. She has now been able to prove that that actually works. That if someone knows who they are and their identity and their history, that they're more likely to be mentally well. Civic and community engagement, I don't know if Arlene is in the room, but her study specifically talks about that our students are going out and making change in the world. And then we have our colleague from New Zealand in the Maori community talking about that knowing your ethnic identity allows for the commitment to cultural perpetuity, that our cultures are not going to die because we're going to keep them alive. So there's a lot more studies saying, yes, academic achievement, ethnic studies impacts academic achievement, but it also impacts our humanity, and it impacts our livelihood, and it impacts our communities. So how is really important to all of this, right? This idea of why is key, but what has been understudied is the how. And that's something that Jeff and I are going to be doing together, that we've been doing together. So one key about, again, a little bit of the why and the how, is that there's something going on about ethnic studies impacting teacher development. So another San Francisco State graduate, Tracy Buenavista, who's now a professor at CSUN, she has been kind of pushing, and alongside all of us, pushing this idea that ethnic studies impacts teacher development. That the teachers who have taken ethnic studies are more likely to serve their students in effective ways. So some things that kind of come out of that is this idea that this is the how piece, is that there's this development of critical consciousness that comes out of taking ethnic studies. Undeniable political and critical consciousness. That there's this great notion that empathy is key to being a human, but then also being an educator, empathy is absolutely necessary. This idea of solidarity beyond your own community. How are you in unison with other communities or in unity with other communities? The notion of cultural, relevant, and responsive teaching, that students who come out of taking ethnic studies or being influenced by ethnic studies actually become more responsive in their teaching. And this goes along with what Jeff will be talking about today, this idea of community responsive pedagogy. A lot of this is based, again, what our provost was saying, on this idea of moving away from deficit thinking about the students that we serve and moving towards strength-based pedagogy. On top of all of that, in ethnic studies, students who become teachers oftentimes are a lot more engaging. Okay? So come and take ethnic studies classes. All right, no, I'm just kidding. But clearly, there's all these things that have been studied and have been talked about. This idea of pedagogy, part of the theme of today was serve the people, pedagogies for a city's university. Did I get that correct? Wow, that flowed out of my mouth all nice. Yeah. So this idea of pedagogy. So I'm going to pause to just talk a little bit about what is pedagogy. Like, we get stuck in thinking about pedagogy as just teaching method. But that's the problem. Because if you sit at these tables and you're just talking about, let's learn how to get our students in groups and have them talk to each other, we think that's revolutionary. But actually, methodology, and those of you in this room, actually all of us in this room are researchers, know that methodology doesn't come first. Am I correct? When you're doing any project, you don't go, okay, you know what, I'm gonna do interviews. And we hate when students do that, right? Oh, I don't know, hate's kind of a strong word, but I get frustrated when students come to me and go, I want to do interviews in my community. I say, about why? By what? What are you doing? Right? Or then they go, I want to do interviews, focus groups, and a survey. And it all becomes about the method. But actually, pedagogy is not necessarily starting with the method of teaching. So pedagogy starts with the concept of purpose. Like this idea of why are we teaching? And so I'm gonna have a few text bombs up here. You can take note or you can ask for the slides, we'll give them to you. But I'm going to talk a little bit about this idea of ethnic studies pedagogy. And that starts with knowing what is the purpose. So the purpose of ethnic studies. Bottom line, ethnic studies started and continues to be about eliminating racism. Now that has become more complex over the decades. Bottom line though, it's eliminating racism and other forms of oppression. The context is key. And this is where a lot of what Jeff will talk about is important, this idea of knowing the context and why it's important to really understand the people that we are serving. When it says serve the people, you have to understand the people before you serve them. And then content. Content, this is where people think that's ethnic studies because it's about people of color. It's more than that. So you can't just hang posters on your wall or have some cute child on your slide. It's my nephew's, okay. It's important, by the way, parents also went to SF State. Important to know that the content must reflect the students and that I'm trying out more recently even more co-generated content because sometimes your students do know more than you. So we want to be able to think about what is the content that reflects the people that we are serving. And then the last piece then is the method. We cannot leave the method out. It does need to be engaging. And so all of this makes up ethnic studies pedagogy, the purpose, the context, the content, and the method. So to kind of narrow it in, one of my favorite ethnic studies pedagogues was Dr. Don Mabalam, who I mentioned is one of our ancestors. And she distilled it down to 3 questions. She says, because, and I said, she's answering the question, why is ethnic studies important? And she says, because ethnic studies helps us answer these questions. Who am I? What is the story of my family and community? And what can I do to make a positive change and bring social justice to my community and the world? I would argue that we can do this in any class. I think sometimes we want to regulate it over to ethnic studies, but we want to be careful with that because it's like saying people of color should solve the issue of racism. It's all of our jobs. And so I feel like it's key to be conscious that there's things that we can do in all of our classes that are quote unquote ethnic studies pedagogy. And to translate some of that, I'm gonna go even further to say that ethnic studies pedagogy is community responsive pedagogy. So if I just put those words differently, all of a sudden it makes much more, I think, sense to some of us that we can be community responsive in any class that we teach. And so ethnic studies is community responsiveness. It is community responsive. So I'm gonna put a huge text bomb. You can take a photo. It's not totally published yet, so you know it might show up somewhere. Jeff and I are currently writing a bunch of different pieces. I know that's a lot of words, yeah? But the main thing, and then I'm gonna go to the next slide to just give you the bullet points. You should always do this for your students. So next slide are just those things. So this idea of community responsive pedagogy, it is ethnic studies. This idea that you centralize context, that it's an equity-centered approach. Equity meaning that we serve students because of what they need, not because of what we think they need. Students' lived experience within their context is important to understand their community and the histories that make up their community. That community responsiveness is related to what Bell Hooks was saying, this idea of freedom. Really bringing us back to the notion of liberation. And it's really about building a student's critical consciousness about themselves and about the world that they live in. Ultimately, to transform cultures, climates and curriculum. And then for the work that we're currently doing now, it's really about wellness. Like, students can graduate San Francisco State with a 4.0 with 5 majors and not be well. That's not cool. And so there's a refocus in our work recently because we know that it is so important to think about the wellness of the people that we work with. Wellness of the faculty and staff, and also the students. And that's what it really means to be community responsive. The focus of the domains, and I will go to the next slide just so you can see, community responsiveness has 3 major domains. Relevance, which is a lot of what I've already been talking about, that Jeff will continue. This idea of responsibility, and this idea of ultimately relationships that are both maintained and continued. So I'm going to hand off to my colleague, Jeff Duncan-Andrade. Let's give him a round of applause.
Okay, how y'all feeling? Okay, that sounds about like my high school class. Let's try that again. It's called call and response, okay? I'll call, you respond. And if you don't know, fake it till you make it. How y'all doing? Okay, thank you. Because your energy, right, then becomes, y'all know your teachers, right? Your energy becomes my energy. So, first of all, I just want to acknowledge how hard the work that we do is, particularly if you're pouring in this way. Right? And so I just want to thank you for coming out today and allowing Allyson and I to share a little bit of palabra with you about how we try to get down in the work. I also want to say that we don't have all this figured out by any means. And there's a way in which I experience some of the myth-making that's gone on around my teaching as really disruptive of actually moving teaching forward, okay? This myth-making that there are these master pedagogues with pixie dust that we just blow on students and suddenly they're like all this stuff. Okay? I've been a teacher. I'm from the 3400 block in East Oakland. I've been a teacher in my community. This is actually my 30th year, okay, working in my community. And cutting across the K-12 environment and the university environment. And what I often tell educators at all levels that I work with is that in 30 years, I have never had a perfect year. I have never had a perfect semester. I have never had a perfect marking period. I've never had a perfect month. I've never had a perfect week. I've never had a perfect day. And I've never had a perfect class in 30 years. But I wake up every day expecting to, knowing that I won't. And for me, right, the most masterful pedagogues that I've ever been around, and probably the most masterful pedagogue that I've ever been around that I've seen in this space is standing right next to me. Okay? Like truly, truly gifted, okay, as a pedagogue. But in all of those 30 years, okay, the one thing that I've learned from the master pedagogues that I've been around is that they don't attempt to sanitize the work. That what they come to understand is that the meaning is in the mess. Okay? And if you resent the messiness of the work, then you're ducking, dodging, and denying your capacity to really master the work, because you find out who you are as a pedagogue when it gets messy. Okay? And when it gets messy, okay, go back to these 3 pieces that Allyson lifted up that I'm gonna drill down a little bit on, okay? And so I'm gonna go over those kind of time-honored 3 R's of teaching, relevance, responsibility, and relationships, and they're in no particular order, okay? And in any given time, with any given student, in any given class, they reorient themselves, okay, about what needs to take priority, all right? So we begin with relevance because we've been talking about ethnic studies. And my tío, who is the Mexicayo firekeeper in my community in East Oakland, Tío Samuel Lynn, wrote a book called America Ca. Okay. Caca, get it? Okay. And I really encourage you to check out some of his work as a way to kind of ground yourself in some of the indigenous histories and stories, of Oakland, of the Ohlone, of our people on this land as a way to orient yourself around purpose. Your purpose is not your content area. Your purpose is the people, or it's not. And if you're trapped up in your content area, you will lose track of the people that need you the most. So the focus needs to remain on those who are the most wounded, the most vulnerable. That's the student that can least afford to have us fail them. So keep your focus there and understand that, y'all, is why teachers drink. Because when you're focused there, right, it gets heavy sometimes because you feel like, damn, like I signed up to have impact, right? And those are the students that are often most challenging your sensibility about whether or not you're really having impact. And so you have to trust that when you pour into the wounded ones, the vulnerable ones, the impact is happening, but it may not show up and register in the way that means the most to you. And that's about you needing to see that you matter. And you really matter in what happens down the line with students. And if you have children or you've been invested in this long enough, you know that you never really know what your impact is until 10, 15, 20 years later. So all you got with the wounded ones is trust. Trust in the ancestors, trust in the Creator, trust in the pillars of your pedagogy, trust in your true north about why you're really doing this work, because it sure as shit ain't for the money. So we start, raises. I'm up for promotion right now, so, shit, I feel like I've been an associate forever. Okay, so we start with relevance. I'm not big on checklists, but I'm going to give you one right now. If your curriculum, content, classroom culture is relevant, then students and you will see and experience, go back, killing me, students' lives, communities, families, and ethnic, cultural, and linguistic histories. That's your checklist. Check yourself. Do your students see these things in the way in which you design activities, projects, evaluation, curriculum, content, relationships in your class? And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to both frame up what these 3 R's are in our research and work, and then I'm going to give you some access to some of the most cutting-edge research that we have that is beginning to validate why this matters so much. Because I'm tired of the debate in neuroscience, in physiology, in social epidemiology, in the medical field, in psychology. There is no debate about why ethnic studies pedagogy matters. There isn't. They've deaded that debate. The only place where that debate is happening is amongst ideologues. And when you have an ideological debate with people that aren't moral, you're wasting your time. The best you can hope for is a stalemate. I love your... There's a bag, I don't know what the hell that thing is, like an iron-on or something. It says, Trump hates me. And I just keep going back to that. Like sometimes it's good to be hated, right? So across disciplines, and this is one of the beauties of ethnic studies, is a cross-disciplinary field. So across these disciplines, study
after study after study, especially within the last decade to 15 years where we've had these huge leaps in neuroscience, okay? These huge leaps in physiology, okay? A decent portion of which is coming out of this city at UCSF. Okay? A lot of the understanding, okay, about how to respond to woundedness, how to respond to trauma, okay, is coming out of this city, right? Our Surgeon General right now, okay, is Nadine Burke, is coming out of work directly in this city with youth in Hunters Point and across the city. So there's a logic sequence that we have in the research about why relevance matters so much. Okay? This isn't theory, right? This is supported by some of the best science that we have. And here's why. So what we know is when students get access, human beings, okay, but we're talking about students right now, but when human beings get access to material that is relevant to them, it builds knowledge of self. And we know that there's a direct link between knowledge of self and what Maslow has referred to as self-esteem. Okay, and if you've ever studied Maslow and you know that the hierarchy of needs, anybody here familiar with hierarchy of needs? Okay, cool. So where does anybody know where self-esteem sits in the hierarchy of needs? Higher up is classically vague. Okay, it's second from the top. Okay, it's literally the window into the pinnacle of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is self-actualization. Now, interestingly enough, if you know anything about Maslow, you know that Maslow actually appropriated the hierarchy of needs. Maslow didn't develop the hierarchy of needs. He stole it from indigenous people. Okay? Now, Maslow himself acknowledges this, but then it's expunged from his work because how inconvenient would it be to say that indigenous people actually have the leading framework for wellness instead of a white dude? But if you look at the history of Maslow, Maslow acknowledges this. There's actually photographic evidence of Maslow on the Blackfoot Reservation where Maslow got sent because he was in New York and he showed up to a convening of high-level thinkers. And this is right after he finishes grad school and he's all juiced, hey, on his theory, hey, of wellness. And his theory of wellness was all about conquering. And so, fortunately, he ran into a self-sensible woman who was leading the field in these conversations and said, actually, I think you're wrong. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you to the Blackfoot Nation to test your theory. And Maslow is transformed because the Blackfoot people have something called the the breath of life framework for wellness. Okay? And it actually, the base of the indigenous framework for wellness is self-actualization. And it's not a pyramid, it's a teepee. That's where Maslow gets the pyramid. Okay? And the teepee is open at the top. Why is the teepee open at the top? Because it's not a closed individual set. We believe in 7 generations principles. So we go up into the cosmos. We go up into the stars. We are our ancestors. Okay? And everything that we do every single day echoes forward 7 generations because everything we do every day is an echoing forward of 7 generations of the best of our ancestors. And so Maslow appropriates this beautiful concept of wellness and then moves it back into a Western epistemology where it's all about the individual. One person gets food, clothing, shelter, and safety, basic needs. Then they get their psychological needs met. Then they get self-esteem, and then they self-actualize for their own individual success. Ethnic studies rejects that notion. What we say is that your individual achievement only matters to the degree that it impacts the whole community. And so in the indigenous, it's self-actualization for what? Self-actualization for community actualization. That's the second tier. For what? The third tier, or the pinnacle in the teepee that goes into the cosmos is cultural perpetuity. To continue on the best of our communities for the next generation. So, Understand that you're building self-esteem in students not so that they can do better in your class or in this university or in this community or in this life, but so that we can do better. Which means that that has to be a core principle of your practice. If you are succeeding in my class, my brother, and right next to you, she is failing, you are failing. It's all of us or none of us. Or it's not. And if our classrooms model an individual paradigm where one student can thrive right next to another student who is suffering, then we are reifying the very model of rugged individualism, which has created the most unequal nation in the history of the industrialized world. Now, we get that right, okay? We get higher levels of hope. A lot of my research has focused specifically on what are the practices, curriculum, engagements that actually elevate hope levels in young people. And when we elevate hope levels, we're more likely to interrupt what Claude Steele's research has called stereotype threat. If you are not familiar with Claude Steele's work, I'll start you off with his latest book called Whistling Vivaldi. Claude is a black man who is a psychologist at Stanford. His work has completely changed the conversation in the field about what goes on internally when you test students, particularly students of color and students that come from poverty. Okay? So how many of you test students in your class? Okay? Well, it's really important that you understand stereotype threat if you're going to test in a way that sets up conditions of equity. When we interrupt stereotype threat, we know that this begins to create the Pygmalion effect. Okay? If you're not familiar with the Pygmalion effect, it's effectively the self-fulfilling prophecy. If you don't know what that means, just listen to Eminem, okay? Who says, "I am whatever you say I am." No matter what you might say to students, okay, what matters most, okay, neurologically, neurobiologically, physiologically, and psychologically is not what you say, but what students feel. So if they feel that you don't really believe in them, it literally has a biochemical impact on them that is interruptive of their ability to perform at the highest level in your classroom. And lastly, if we get these pieces in place, then we get what Carol Dweck, also Stanford seems to be a theme, she's also at Stanford, has called the growth mindset. Right? Now, Carol's work has been consistently misused in schools, so much so that she created an entirely new PowerPoint to go back out in the lecture circuit to correct behaviors that were misusing her first PowerPoint. And what Dweck points out is that yes, we want a growth mindset in students. But what we know from the research is that the student's mindset reflects what? Our mindset. So if students have what Dweck refers to as a fixed mindset, don't change the students. Didn't your mama ever tell you if it ain't broke? Our students don't need to be fixed. This place needs to be fixed. Our pedagogy, our practice, reflects back to us and our students. So if you have a student that's stuck, you are the solution. Keep banging on your craft and understand that the student won't change until we change. We get that kind of relevant approach, then we need to be wrestling with what is our responsibility. Of all the experts I've met with, all the books I've read, all the conferences I've been to, no resource has better impacted how I understand how trauma and toxic stress affect the body and brain of students than this book. You are working with students that are experiencing toxic stress and trauma by virtue of white supremacy, by virtue of class supremacy, by virtue of heterosupremacy, by virtue of language supremacy. This is not debated in the medical field. We have built a society that is toxically stressful for women, for people of color, for people in poverty, for immigrants. That is known fact in the medical research. The open question is, what the hell are we going to do about it? Well, we are first responders. And what I love about Bruce Perry's work is he is the first MD I've ever heard say that teachers are first responders. Because where does youth and young adult trauma go? Here, to classrooms. So this will really help you, this book will really help you understand both how trauma and toxic stress manifests itself, and then what you can do about it. And in all likelihood, many of you will find yourselves in this book as well. Some other light reading. Oxford calls Robert Putnam the world's most influential scholar, certainly a dubious honor. But his book, Bowling Alone, has really begun to frame just how toxic the impact of an individualistic model of schooling is on our society. The reference in the title is to some of Putnam's research where he started looking at places that have historically been social spaces in our society, one of them being bowling alleys. And he was just stunned by the number of people that are bowling alone now. There's no interaction. So much isolation. Unnatural causes. Largest study ever conducted by the research community on the impact of inequality. It was a longitudinal global study of this question: is inequality making us sick? Short answer: yes, widely agreed upon across all the fields that I laid out. The biggest threat to health and wellness on the planet is inequality. No debate in the medical field about that. So if we want wellness, if we want a healthy classroom, a healthy university, a healthy community, a healthy nation, according to everything that we know in the research, at the top of our priority list has to be the eradication of inequality and no oppression Olympics. You cannot be tackling white supremacy and ignore male supremacy. You can't be tackling male supremacy and ignore heterosupremacy. You can't be tackling heterosupremacy and ignore class supremacy. All forms of inequality on the table all the time. Any form of inequality in your classroom, odious to your pedagogy. That's when we'll really become the people's university. And then lastly, Michelle Alexander's treatment of the school-to-prison pipeline, the new Jim Crow, is one of the most thoroughly researched pieces of writing that I've seen about what happens when we get it wrong, particularly for our most wounded students. This isn't a game. The evidence is clear that when we get it wrong with our students, particularly our most wounded ones, particularly our students of color, particularly our students that are coming out of communities embedded in multi-generational poverty, when we get it wrong, it's life-threatening. So think again about another opportunity for that student that isn't meeting the mark. Go again and again and again to create opportunities for them to succeed in your class. And then lastly, at the end of the day, if you've taught for a day, you know that it always boils down to one thing and one thing only, and that's relationships. When you get stuck with a student, abandon pedagogy and go to relationship, because they are engaging in what Herb Cole has coined, or the term Herb Cole coined is willed not learning. It's a conscious resistance that is about a block that is probably best captured in a quote from this book that a student said to Herb. And he said, "Herb, I don't care what you know until I know that you care." And nowhere does this become more biologically central to a student's presence in your class than when they are a wounded one. His book, I Won't Learn From You, is one of the first research endeavors to examine not the students that succeed, but the students that are opting out. He wanted to understand what was that behavior about. How many of you have ever had a student that would like show up every day to class, and then you get to the end of the semester and you're like, damn, they didn't do anything? How many of you had that student before? Okay, yeah. Hey, Herb Cole says that's your most committed student. Think about the commitment it takes to come every day to our classes and not learn shit. Okay? And what I love about Herb's work is he says this isn't accidental, this is intentional. This is willed not learning. It's a conscious endeavor, not let you in. And that's really about relationships. And the research concurs. Again, across the way at Stanford, Robert Sapolsky, who runs one of the nation's most prestigious neurobiology labs. Robert is considered one of the world's leading experts on stress. His book, Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, is mandatory reading in virtually every health field. But I find that very few educators have read it. And to be completely honest with you, I don't recommend it. It's like 600 pages in 6-point font. Now, if you nerd out on neuroscience like I do, it's a great read. But not so much. This documentary film available on your whatever your streaming provider is, Netflix, YouTube, is a great summary of Sapolsky's work and what led to Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. Brene Brown, a lot of folks got up on Brene Brown because of her TED Talk. A lot of folks, though, haven't actually read Brene's work. So while I think TED Talks are great, I've done a TED Talk, they actually scare me. Because they give people just enough information about a really complex idea to go do harm. So if you find a TED Talk that you really like, read. Go deep into that. So if you like Brene's TED Talk, get Brene's New York Times bestseller called Daring Greatly, where she gives a much deeper treatment and begins to disentangle what may be the single most important concept for us to build meaningful relationships, period, but especially with students. And what she does is she disentangles the concept of sympathy and empathy. And what her research, among many others, has revealed is that when you have a sympathetic connection or reaction to somebody, biochemically and neurobiologically, you have almost no movement in your body because you're not actually connecting when you are sympathetic towards somebody. But empathy, the concept that Allyson laid out earlier, is the essence of meaningful relationships because empathy is only developed through shared struggle. So what you are shooting for with your students is a connectedness around shared struggle. It doesn't mean you have to have the same struggle. But empathy, different from sympathy, is I feel you. And you hear our students say this all the time. I feel you, dog. I feel you. They're literally articulating an empathic connection. And the list goes on and on and on. From our colleagues all over the country. Validating again and again and again, not experientially, not qualitatively, but actually what's going on physiologically for us when we make connections for our students. It literally saves your life and theirs. It is good for you to be connected to students. And you know this anecdotally because when you feel disconnected from students, it's a longer ride home. But when you feel like you were the business that day and you were really connecting with students, that ride home feels way different. And we now know physiologically why that is. Because connected relationships are really good for your body. So we don't have time to do a deep treatment today about how we do it, so I'm going to give you one starting point that you can take with you this semester. Be curious about your students. Be curious about the students that you feel the most disconnected from. and then become an ethnographer of that student's life. I don't literally mean to apply to IRB, to start studying. No, okay? But a social ethnographer of who is actually in my class and why are they in my class. Create assignments that tag whatever it is, math, science, social science, to a wondering about your students and a wondering about their wonderings about your class and the area of expertise that you've spent the better part of your life crafting. Find the connection in the content. And you begin to develop a real relationship that actually is about your content. So I'm just going to end very much where Allyson and I began by saying that we don't have all this figured out. And I told you at the beginning that for 30 years, I've been banging on my craft. And I know, that next week when we start classes, that I'm going to struggle in spots. And so what we leave you with is a promise of an offer. And the promise is that we will struggle alongside you as your colleagues, as your community members, to try to figure this out for the students that need us the most. Don't do this in isolation. If there is anything that we can offer you that will allow you to serve our students and our community better, please don't hesitate to reach out. We may not and probably won't have the answer for you, but we are always down to commiserate at the bar. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for how you serve this community, and we wish you a great semester and all the years going forward. Thank you.
So I have had the privilege of being inspired by these people for years, and I'm so happy that we're able to share them with you and just recognize what power we have here at San Francisco State. Thank you. Thank you all for opening your hearts and minds to consider the relevance of ethnic studies pedagogies, our responsibilities as equity-minded teachers, and the significance of our relationships with one another and our students. I invite you to be vulnerable with each other as you engage love, abundance, and joy, and as you meet the people at your table to discuss how the ideas raised by Drs. Duncan-Andrade and Tintiangco-Cubales and Provost Summit might impact your work together today. Have a great retreat.
So hello, I'm Maggie Beers. I'm Assistant Vice President for Teaching and Learning, which is housed within Faculty Affairs. I lead the CEDL Collaborative Leadership Team, which is composed of Ming Dariotis, Faculty Director of CEDL, Tegan Summers, the Director of Teaching and Learning Programs and Services, and Leilani Serafin, our Communications and Operations Lead. I'd like to echo the gratitude expressed earlier to the CEDL team, instructional designers and associates, Deb Perry, Konstantina Seni, Heidi Fridrickson, Angie Petty, and Meg Gorzicki for their meticulous planning and execution of today's event. In addition, I'd like to recognize our sponsors once more, the Academic Senate, the Provost Office, UCorp, University Foundation, and Housing, Dining, and Conferencing Services. As you carry out your searches for faculty this year, the Housing, Dining, and Conferencing Services encourages you to visit their website to learn more about housing options, especially their suites for visiting candidates. And now, on behalf of the Center for Equity and Excellence in Teaching and Learning, it is my honor to introduce Dr. Lynn Mahoney, the 14th president of San Francisco State University and the first woman appointed to serve in this role in a permanent capacity. Woo. Thank you. Dr. Mahoney has remained an unrelenting advocate for student success throughout her esteemed career, first as an American history scholar and faculty member, and later as an administrator in various roles that have encompassed undergraduate education, enrollment planning, integrative learning, institutional research, and most recently, Provost. Since arriving on campus 6 short months ago, President Mahoney has made a point to proactively engage our community and learn the stories of our faculty, staff, and students. I believe I speak for many in saying that her energy, her candor, and her authenticity have helped reinvigorate a shared sense of purpose and a certain optimism as we work together to uphold our mission and commitment to social justice. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Lynn Mahoney, President of San Francisco State University.
Someone referred to this as a presidential address. I had a moment of great panic. It will not be that formal. And I hope that there'll be no rebuttals afterward as well. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here today and an opportunity to kind of eavesdrop at some of the tables. There's nothing more important at a university than its academic mission. We are first and foremost an academic university, an intellectual community. And what of course makes ours special is we harness that to an equally deep commitment to social justice and to our region. So events like this is just about the most exciting things I get to attend. And I was inspired by what I heard at some of the tables, and I apologize to those that I didn't get to, but at the reception, feel free to grab me and tell me what you were working on. And what I was amazed by, first of all, the theme of the whole day and the plenary this morning, which I'll have an opportunity, I think, to watch. I think it's been recorded. It just shows a great commitment to who we are, what we do, and to our students. And this is the last week of freedom before everything starts on Monday. So for you to have given up a day, not just to work on your own work, but to contribute to the growth and health of the entire academic mission is really a testament to the commitment that you all have. And then when I looked at the content, really, truly remarkable. And the range, I saw an enthusiastic conversation about GWAR. I have been in the CSU for almost 12 years. I have never seen such GWAR enthusiasm before. Passionate conversations about formerly incarcerated students, passionate conversations about first-year students. I thought for a brief moment that we had a new acronym at San Francisco State called PUDDING, but I found out that we were talking about coding. But to show you how many acronyms I've learned, I did not put it past us that we would have one called pudding. So, again, we recognize, and there was one on the left side here, you were talking about retention of students and teachers. And we need to retain all of our human resources, our staff, our students, and our faculty. So I appreciate that conversation as well. To that end, I want to reiterate the commitment I know our provost has made for several years in terms of investing in the faculty. I just had recent data after a really tragic 5 years during the Great Recession. We finally have exceeded the number of faculty we had at the beginning. That's a really important step forward. Investments in CETL, and I'll echo the thanks for CETL and the Academic Senate for today's event, but investments in CETL, that's an investment in you. I saw Michael Scott hard at work at a table. I don't know where he went, and I don't have my glasses on. There he is. I'm assuming you were talking about undergraduate research and other things. So our commitment to you is to continue to do this. Our investment in you is an investment in our students. An investment in our students is an investment in San Francisco and the Bay Area. We recently did an analysis of zip codes to see where folks lived, and the majority of our students, about 46%, live in San Francisco, and about another 47 or so come from the Peninsula and the Bay and East Bay, a smaller number from Marin. So when we invest in you, we're investing in our students, and then in turn, we're investing in our community. So it's a win-win-win. So I will conclude by just saying, again, with deep gratitude for what you do, a renewed commitment to ensuring as best we can in the CSU that you are adequately supported and valued for what you do. And then just to confirm that this is all part of a larger commitment, and it's a commitment to our students, to their families, and to their regions as we provide them and ensure they get the degrees that they need for their own mobility and for transforming our region. So thank you, thank you. Please introduce yourself if I haven't met you yet. Talk to me a little bit about what you did today. And I wish you all a spectacular spring 2020.